Welcome back to Authentic Relationships. So I figured, in the spirit of being authentic and encouraging others to connect authentically, that maybe I should go first. So I'm going to make the next few videos about myself and some of the stuff that I've been through in the last few years. At some point, I'm going to dive deeper and go back and share some of my early life stuff, mistakes that I've made, um, blind spots that I've had, good stuff, not so good stuff, the good, the bad, and the ugly, if you will. So, but I'm going to start 2021 because that kind of set off what I would call a series of unfortunate events. So I had a lovely romantic partner. His name was Jeff. He was a musician, a saxophone player, and we had 9 beautiful years together. And he had a health condition when I met him, even though he was young when it occurred, oddly young for what his situation was. And in 2021, he left this earth to go to where I know is a better place. So it wasn't like a really big surprise. He had this major health condition. He had almost lost his life before I met him, about 6 months before we met. And he decided that since he did get a second chance at life, that he had never had true love, and that was his mission, to find true love. And fortunately, he chose me. So he was just a lovely person. He was vegetarian, not because it was in vogue. He had been that way for 20 years when I met him, and just because he couldn't bear the thought of hurting animals. And he was always, just very patient, very kind person, but fun. We had a lot of great times and took some great vacations. We'd be like two little kids when we were together. It was really awesome. And even though, we had some major, a handful of times we had some big issues we had to deal with, I just really respect both of us actually for the way that we handled it. There was one time, for example, that it was in the height of the panic of COVID, and he already had a health condition, so he was and he was scared. He was, the media was saying that, we're all going to die, essentially. And I had someone in the family who was in the emergency room that was being discharged. And his fear was so high that he said, well, if you go and pick them up, don't come home. And he meant it. Now, this isn't because he's a jerk. He was not a jerk. He was a very loving, sweet, kind person, but that was the level of his actual terror. So I didn't argue about it. I didn't, say, how dare you tell me not to come back to my house or anything. But he also did not waver. So I thought about it. I packed a bag and I left for a month, and I went and stayed with this family member. So that's a big deal, right? And yet somehow we managed to navigate that without yelling and screaming and name calling or degrading each other. He respected where I was coming from, that I had to do what I felt was the right thing, and I respected where he was coming from, which was a place of true fear. So he had to get CAT scans every year to check up on the progress of this surgery that they had done, because it's the kind of thing that starts to kind of come back. And, we got a kind of a red flag year where there were complications, and we were in Cleveland Clinic. So his condition was an aortic dissection. I doubt most of you are familiar with that, but that's where the aorta that comes off the heart starts to, the layers start to unravel. So imagine, you've got your skin on your body, and it has the epidermis and the different layers, right? So your blood vessels have the same thing. There's different layers. So those layers started to peel apart, and blood was flowing through what they call a false lumen. It was flowing between the layers instead of just in the middle. And eventually the pressure can make that rupture. So they caught it in the nick of time, the first time, and he was very blessed because even other thoracic surgeons had told him that if that doctor hadn't been on call that night, he wouldn't have made it because that doctor was exceptional. And he wound up retiring actually 6 months after that. So he was a miracle story. We got together, but we had to get these, he had to get these CAT scans every year. And we started going to Cleveland Clinic because they were like the best of the best when it comes to heart surgeries, etc. But when he developed this complication, which was where the original surgery, the way I have it, the original surgery, the scar tissue was pressing on his on his coronary artery. So it was kind of like he had narrowing of his coronary arteries, but not from plaque or what you would normally have a heart attack from, but from complication of the first surgery. So at this point, he was like a hot potato because it was a very involved surgery the first time. I mean, it's a total miracle that this surgeon had pulled it off. And so the surgeon didn't really want to go in there and risk, trying to get this done. And the cardiologist, normally they would like put a stent in, right, to open up the artery. But because of the surgery, it was a very complicated, difficult to try to like go in and go through these corners and stuff. So they couldn't decide for like a week. Like we literally just sat in the hospital room while they were arguing back and forth, trying to like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And meanwhile, they do heart transplants every day of the week. They got that dialed in, but nobody wanted to touch him. So eventually the head cardiologist said, I think I can do it. And he was right. And it bought Jeff 2 more years. So we had 2 more wonderful years together. So, but then, before he went, he was starting to have chest pain again. And we knew that this was kind of reoccurring. The stent wasn't holding. And even though you may know someone, it's like the Grim Reaper was kind of hanging out in our house for a couple of weeks before. Even though, someone may be chronically ill or, they may, that their time is coming. As they say, cliche, nothing can prepare you for when it actually happens. And that is true. And grief is intense and grief is real and it takes as long as it takes. And I did not want to hear that. So my body processed it in a very odd way. I mean, like the first 2 or 3 days, it's like my body was on fire. It was very strange. It was just like I was burning off all of this trauma or grief or something, at least the first round of it. I can't explain that sensation. And you go through the shock and there's tears all along the way. Even, wow, 3.5 years at least in, I went to a breath workshop and wow, did another wave come. Like I wasn't crying, I was wailing. And I just released so much grief that day. And that was like 3.5 years after he passed. And you kind of go back to life as normal and you're doing your job, which I'm a hypnotherapist, so that's what I was doing. And which in a way is a relief because I'm able to focus on other people and what's going on with them, gets my mind off of me and what's going on with me. But you think you're done because you're going to the grocery store and you're hanging out with your family and you're doing your job, and then it just blindsides you. And it seemed like every movie I watched or every show had to have somebody that died. It would just trigger it all over again. I'm sure that, and probably a good thing. It probably helped me process it quicker, but it was intense. And it's the thing with Jeff, he was really a truly wonderful person. And I'm going to go into some more details with other stuff, from my earlier life, where I didn't have good relationships. I had some of the classic dysfunctional, abusive, whatever you want to get out the checklist of enabling unhealthy relationships. And that was me. But Jeff was different because I'd done a lot of the healing work that I do on people. I'd done it on myself. So it was almost like a line of demarcation. Before I had this NLP and hypnosis done on me, I'd never had a good relationship. And after that, I never had a bad one. And Jeff was the best that I'd had. But it was more than just being my romantic partner. He was honestly the first person I ever felt truly loved me and truly cared for me. And, it was like he was my mother, my father, my whole family. And so I lost like my whole family is what it felt like. I do have a family, but we're not close. And there's just reasons which I'll go into at some point about why that, kind of got set up that way. And it's not that we don't get along or that there's any animosity. There's not a close bond. And Jeff was all of those things for me. And wow, he really loved me. And the nurse in the cath lab said she had to come out and tell me that even as he was dying, he said, I have to make it for Serena. I can't leave Serena, who's dying and thinking about someone else. And that's the kind of love I'm so grateful to have received from him. And it was not easy to go on without it. And I'm not going to lie, there were days that, wow, I'm like, I just wanted to go where he is. And I didn't want to be here anymore. Life had lost its luster and appeal. Whew, I didn't really see that coming. But it is true. It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all, because he showed me how and what it's supposed to look like. And I'll be doing another video in a few days where I talk about some of the other dominoes that fell after that. It was like life's like, okay, it's Serena's turn to go through it again. And it was sort of a series of unfortunate events that got set in place, but I will always cherish and be grateful for the love that he gave me. And I am learning to continue on and find love again. So I just wanted to share something real about me in the spirit, like I said, of being authentic. I was like, I'll go first. And I would love to hear any comments you have about experiences you may have been through. And don't forget that I have a school community where we can share with each other. And bye for now.